Hey guys, this is Arswi. I used to think the hardest part of growing up was leaving behind the places we loved, but I was wrong. The hardest part is realizing that while you were busy living your future, someone you loved was quietly saying goodbye to theirs without ever letting you see them cry. When I was 12 years old, my family moved into a creaky two-story house in Giles Ferry, a quiet college town tucked deep into the river valley. The air there always smelled faintly of damp oak leaves, old book glue, and the bitter dark roast from the cafe down by the train tracks. Our house stood so close to the one next door that if you stretched your arm out of my second floor bedroom window, you could almost touch the dark green wooden shutters of the house beside us. That house belonged to Marin's family. Marin was a quiet girl with charcoal dust usually smudged across her knuckles, oversized knit sweaters, and an endless curiosity for things most people walked right past. Her bedroom window faced mine directly across a narrow gravel driveway. On the night I moved in, as I was unpacking cardboard boxes in the dark, I heard a sharp tap against my glass. I pushed the sash up, and there was Marin sitting on her sill with a flashlight angled under her chin, grinning. She held up a thick spool of yellow nylon rope tied to a wooden pulley. Over the next 3 days, we built what we called the sky cable. It was a simple rig, just a heavy clothesline strung tightly between our two window frames, anchored by galvanized steel hooks driven into the wood. Suspended from it was an old cedar cigar box lined with felt. With a gentle tug of the rope, the box would slide silently through the cool night air, traveling back and forth across the narrow gap between our worlds. For years, that cedar box was the beating heart of our lives. It carried late-night notes written on torn yellow legal pad paper, slices of stolen pie, lukewarm cider in small thermos flasks, and mixtapes burned onto CDs with titles scribbled in Sharpie, like Music for Cold Rain or Songs to Listen to at 3 a.m. We didn't even need to speak out loud. When the small brass bicycle bell mounted on my window frame chimed, it meant a message was crossing the dark gap above the driveway. In a town dominated by university students who moved in and out every 4 years, creating an endless cycle of temporary faces, Marin and I felt permanent. We were the constants of Giles Ferry. During high school, when the rest of the world felt overwhelmingly loud and uncertain, our little wire system was a sanctuary. We spent hundreds of hours sitting on our respective sills, talking across the quiet air while the cigar box traveled back and forth between us. We made a promise on a freezing November night when we were 17. We were sitting on the edges of our windows, our boots dangling out over the roof shingles, watching the yellow streetlight flickering in the mist below. Marin reached across the wire and handed me a tiny brass key on a leather string. It was the key to a small metal cash box she kept hidden under her bedroom floorboards, filled with every single note, drawing, and trinket we had ever sent across the wire. She looked at me, her cheeks flushed red from the cold, and said that if either of us ever left Giles Ferry for good, we weren't allowed to say a big dramatic goodbye. Instead, we had to put one final secret in the cigar box, send it across the wire, and leave it there. That way, our childhood would stay locked in time, safe between our windows forever. It felt like a joke back then, a sweet, theatrical pact made by two teenagers who couldn't imagine a world where they wouldn't live 5 feet apart. But time has a quiet, relentless way of pulling apart even the tightest knots. After high school, I stayed in town for a few years to attend a local college, while Marin stayed home to take online art classes and help care for her grandmother. At first, the sky cable remained as active as ever, but as my classes got harder and my social circle shifted toward campus downtown, the brass bell chimed less often. The notes turned into short texts, and the late nights on the windowsill were replaced by late nights at the library. Then came the big move. I accepted an entry-level job at an architectural firm in Chicago. The week I packed up my car, Marin helped me load the trunk. We hugged on the gravel driveway under the blinding summer sun. We laughed about how we were real adults now, promising to call every single week. We forgot all about the pact we had made years ago. We didn't use the cigar box that day. We just said, "See you soon," and I drove away. In Chicago, my life became a blur of concrete glass towers and 60-hour work weeks. The weekly phone calls with Marin slowly degraded into monthly texts, then quarterly birthday messages. Life wasn't cruel, it was just fast. Whenever I thought of Marin, I pictured her exactly as she had always been, sitting by her window with paint on her hands, surrounded by the warm, familiar fog of Giles Ferry. I always assumed she would be there whenever I finally had time to slow down and visit. 4 years passed without me setting foot back in my hometown. Last October, my mother called to tell me she was finally selling our old home and moving into a smaller condo near the coast. She asked if I could fly back for one final weekend to clean out my childhood bedroom. I agreed, taking a few days off work, thinking it would be a simple, nostalgic weekend trip. I drove into Giles Ferry on a dark, wet Friday evening. The air was cold, smelling of sodden leaves and wood smoke, exactly as I remembered. But stepping into my bare bedroom felt hollow. The furniture was gone, the carpet was faded, and my voice echoed against the empty walls. When I walked over to the window and pushed up the frame, a cold breeze swept into the room. There, still anchored to the wooden casing, was the rusted steel hook, and dangling from the weather-beaten nylon rope, resting against the damp siding of Marin's house next door, was the old cedar cigar box. I looked across at Marin's window. The curtains were drawn completely dark. The house looked strangely abandoned, the lawn overgrown, no car in the driveway. A strange knot tightened in my chest. I reached out, grabbed the frayed rope, and pulled. The rusted pulley creaked loudly in the quiet night air as the wooden box slid slowly across the driveway toward me. When I reached out and lifted the wet lid, my hands began to tremble. Inside was a dried red leaf, an unlabeled cassette tape, and an envelope sealed with wax with my name written in Marin's familiar, rounded handwriting. The letter was dated 9 months earlier. I unfolded the paper with cold, shaking fingers and read her words under the yellow light of the empty room. She wrote, "Hey, if you're reading this, it means you finally came home to clear out your room, just like your mom said you would eventually. I'm sorry I didn't tell you on the phone. You were working so hard in Chicago building the life you always dreamed about, and I couldn't bear to become a shadow hanging over your new world. 18 months ago, the doctors found a tumor. They tried everything, but some things just can't be fixed." She continued, "I didn't want you to see me get weak or hear my voice fade on a bad phone connection. I wanted you to remember us sitting on the roof, watching the fog roll over the town, full of life and infinite time. I spent my last good months sitting by this window, listening to the old tapes we made. Every time the autumn wind blew and made the brass bell clink against the sill, I closed my eyes and pretended it was you sending me another note. The Sky Cable was the best thing I ever built. Thank you for opening your window that night when we were 12. I left the key under the floorboards in my room. Everything we shared is safe. Don't be sad that the wire stopped moving. Just remember that love doesn't end when the line goes quiet." I stood at that open window in the freezing rain for a long time, holding her letter to my chest as tears blurred the yellow streetlights below. Marin had passed away 6 months before I ever came back to Giles Ferry. She had left this world quietly, leaving behind only the rope, the cedar box, and a mountain of unspoken words I was too busy to hear. The next morning, I went into her empty house through the back door her family had left unlocked for the real estate agent. I walked up to her dark bedroom, lifted the loose floorboard under her window, and pulled out the metal lockbox. Inside, neatly stacked and preserved, was every single note, drawing, and mixtape I had ever sent her across the gap. She hadn't thrown away a single piece of paper. If there is someone in your life right now, someone whose voice you haven't heard in months, someone you keep meaning to call as soon as your schedule clears up, please listen to me. Don't wait for a better time. Pick up the phone, write the letter, send the text, because the quietest tragedies in life aren't the arguments that tear us apart. They are the silent goodbyes we never knew were happening until the line goes cold. This is Arsri. Take care of each other.